Adam, let's kick things off here with the Temple stuff.
Man, this is the sort of thing that I'm kind of surprised we haven't had more of during the legal sports betting era. And I'm sure that's a take that people within the regulated industry don't necessarily want to hear. But let's summarize real quick. A Temple and UAB game was flagged by U.S. Integrity, the monitoring service that works with a number of the college conferences, a number of the sports books, for unusual betting activity. What was that unusual betting activity? Well, Matthew, I'll fill you in on that, even though you already know. When a game that is not a name kind of game, that does not have a major injury, that does not have some sort of eligibility issue, all of a sudden steams from one team laying 1.5 to one team laying 8. Something is amiss. And this is not the hardest thing that they've ever had to do, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you take a look at this, and it was, now they dug into it. There was a couple of other suspicious line activities that went on with this team, and so now they're really digging in to see what's going on with all of that. Listen, college basketball outside of March Madness, and I guess you could say conference tournament times and March Madness, as you know, Adam, just the handle for college basketball is just, it's a pittance compared to what it is for all the other sports. And certainly, like you mentioned, in a game like that, right? And so when tons of money starts flowing, it's flowing fast and it's flowing in a short amount of time, you start to wonder, hey, there might be something going on here. And it seems like as they've started to dig, while there's been nothing conclusive quite yet, as they've started to dig, it certainly looks like there's probably, where there's smoke, there's fire type thing.
It is. And a couple of folks on Twitter who follow college basketball closely are like, yeah, this is the second time this year I've seen this with Temple, where there's some late steam that goes against Temple, and all of a sudden Temple gets its butt kicked, which is what happened in the UAB game. They end up losing by more than 3 times the spread anyway. So
out rebounded by 2.5 times and stuff, which you just don't see in games. It's just odd, just really weird stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So a few things to note out of this, and I'll get the broken record thing out of the way first. This was caught in the legal market because of the legal market. Period. End of story. Because if you think this is the first time this sort of thing has happened recently, you're probably wrong. You probably can't prove it because it was probably going on involving offshore. And so because it's happening in the legal market, you have a better way to monitor that betting activity. And let's be honest, like I said earlier, for U.S. Integrity, this isn't a hard one, right? This is not a hard pattern for anyone who's run a book to notice that something is unusual here, especially if they've seen it more than once with a certain team. Now, there has been the usual rush to judgment from many talking heads about, see, this is why the proliferation of sports betting is going to be a problem in the United States. Actually, this is why having a legal and regulated market that immediately identifies irregularities and takes action to prevent them from happening in the future is a good thing. Because let's go back in time. Nearly every college betting scandal we've had in the, last 100 years, Matt, has been in college basketball, has involved point shaving, and has been caught by sports books. Nevada sports books, over time, have been the ones to identify when these irregularities have been happening. And now you have more monitoring going on because of the proliferation of regulated betting. So those who are using this to call it a harbinger of doom for the spread of legal sports betting, it's misguided. You're wrong about that. Do I think that because the perception is all there on something like this, right? It's accurate. Do I think the perception is a problem? I absolutely think that the perception is a problem, but the perception is a problem because of what we think the response might be from regulators, from lawmakers, if they were to overreact to something like this.
Yeah, and listen, I've already seen the think pieces, and if you're watching on video, I'll go ahead and use the air quotes out there about, this is why college sports, you don't have to ban all sports betting, but we should definitely get rid of college sports betting, yada, 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 and all the different states that we've already talked about that have these things in place about state teams and things and whatnot. And Adam, listen, as you mentioned, one, it's going to happen regardless. There are bad people in this world. As much as we'd like to sit and pretend like everything is all rainbows and unicorns, that's just not the case. And there are bad people who are going to do bad things. And so whether we have legalized collegiate betting or not, this is still going to take place. There are still always going to be people who are looking for an edge, who are looking to game the system. It's just the way that it's always been. And as you said, if you do remove that, all you've done is remove another layer of trying to get this out of there, or at least trying to catch this before it gets too incredibly crazy. And so that thought process needs to go. It's the easiest low-hanging fruit of, oh, see why, and this is what we can do. How easy is it? Just ban college sports betting. But again, guys, think it through. Listen about the different points that we're trying to talk about here as to why that's not a good idea with all of this. And then, Adam, at the end of the day, we are, anytime in gambling, and I've been in it long enough, and it doesn't matter if it's poker, and it doesn't matter if it's DFS, and it doesn't matter if it's sports betting, whatever it is, there are always going to be people who are trying to game the system. There are always going to be people who are trying to gain an edge in some way, shape, or form, doing something either shady or nefarious or outright illegal. It's just the way, it's just the nature of all of it, right? It is 99% great and 1% bad. It's just we have to talk about the 1% stuff because we need to highlight that stuff. We need to make sure that it doesn't work and doesn't get through, and it doesn't encourage more people to try that stuff in what we, in this industry that you and I, both really, really like and like to follow and all that. But, again, it's just the jump to conclusions of, yeah, this is why we got to get rid of it. And here's the example and blah, blah, blah. It's the low hanging fruit. It's the easy thing to do. And it's not a well thought out position.
And it tends to be a position of those who are part of the greater sports landscape as opposed to those who are part of the sports betting landscape. The challenge for those in the sports betting landscape is that those lines are now very blurred as to which media is which, right? And I do acknowledge that as a real perception problem as we start talking about Shams being a partner with FanDuel and all the other type of issues we've seen when it comes to this, the Shohei Ohtani situation in free agency. Like, those are things in which, yes, it becomes harder to distinguish sports media from sports betting media, especially when sports media is being paid by sportsbooks. I respect all of that. And I'm with you in general on the idea of what we're talking about with regulated college betting. Tell me what you think about this. The one area where I do see where the logic comes in is with what we've seen recently in Ohio and in Maryland with banning college prop betting. Because we're talking about something that is a lot more easily manipulated and a lot more difficult to catch. And I understand that a lot of people out there will say, well, you could solve that with limits, right? You can't get a lot down on, a group of 5 rebounding prop. Yeah, you can't. But that is also something where the juice is not worth the squeeze in offering it in the first place in how easy it is to manipulate that sort of market. And that's the sort of harm that wouldn't just harm legal sports betting. You're talking about a kid who could be pretty irreparably harmed in a situation like that too if they make a rash or uninformed decision.
Yeah, and listen, that to me, I think is perfect. One, the sports books, honestly, if it came down to it and you give them truth serum, they wouldn't care. The handle on that is so incredibly low. You and I, as someone who lived in Nevada as long as we did, and we were sitting here, we were just always beating the table about, hey, we just want options. Like, give us more options. Well, that has come to town now with the launch of the new MGM book and the launch of the new Caesars book and Boyd to give them their props. And actually, Stations Casinos here in town actually has a full menu and all that. We were mainly screaming about that, Adam, though, from the professional ranks, right? Like, we were not clamoring for college props. Like, we were not, that wasn't what we were talking about when we were saying, like, hey, man, really wish we had a more diversified menu, And so if you went to all these books, it's so low. As you mentioned, the juice just really isn't worth the squeeze. There's a reason why this is pro, so we're not going to talk about, that stuff is still amateur, but there's a reason why if you want to bet a match in a low-level tennis tournament that's taking place in Bumskuzzle, Austria, or whatever, something like that, with 2 guys you've never heard of, you're likely going to be able to get about $200 down on it because, like, they don't know anything that's going on. It's too much nonsense that could happen and anything like that or whatever. And that's pro. This is actual, this is still amateur sports. And save me it's NIL, it's not amateur, whatever. Save me those stuff. It's still amateur sports. Most of these guys aren't making a ton of money doing any of this thing. So I'm with you. Like, just why? Why do we need props? Why? We don't need collegiate props. We certainly don't need collegiate props in college basketball where, like, there's 300 plus teams and, like, it's just impossible to regulate.
I do have to push back on one thing, though. Bumskuzzle, Austria is one of my favorite places in Europe.
to see tennis for sure too. Like
Yeah,
to
yeah,
go
yeah.
and view tennis.
Yeah,
they
great tournament there every single year. The Bum Scuzzle Hell 100. Yes.
Yes, fantastic on that. Their second court, not just the center court is beautiful, but even the second court.
Oh
is really
goodness.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.